It started with a single document, or more precisely, the absence of one. In the corridors of royal power, where every birth, every name, every bloodline is meticulously recorded and preserved, the silence surrounding one particular name has grown deafening. A name once whispered with celebration, now spoken with suspicion. That name is Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor. No one could have predicted the chaos that would unfold from a simple question. Where's the verified birth certificate? It should have been routine, standard, a mere formality filed in dusty archives, just like the others. But when the question was raised by a curious journalist, more out of procedural inquiry than scandalous curiosity, what followed was a revelation that would shake the royal family to its very core. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story you're about to hear isn't about just a document. It's about the crown's credibility, a father's heartbreak, a mother's desperate ambition, and a king's decision that would erase titles, sever bonds, and ignite a firestorm that won't be extinguished anytime soon. But to understand the depth of what's happening now, we must begin at the very moment where the facade first began to crack, the day that little Archie was born. On May 6, 2019, the world waited in anticipation. Buckingham Palace had announced that the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, was in labor. Media vans camped outside hospitals. Royal watchers clutched their phones, notifications set, waiting for history. After all, this wasn't just any royal birth. This was the first mixed-race baby to be born into the British monarchy in modern history. It was a moment poised to rewrite royal tradition, usher in a new era, and redefine the image of the crown in a globalized world. Except something felt off. There were no official press briefings from the hospital where royal births traditionally occurred. No sightings of medical staff. No pictures of Harry and Meghan leaving the Lindo wing, swaddled baby in tow, like Diana and Charles before them, or even William and Kate. Instead, just 2 days later, they appeared in a sterile white hallway at Windsor Castle, baby wrapped tight, the moment choreographed to the second. It was brief, rushed, and Meghan's smile, while radiant, carried a nervous edge. Harry's face was harder to read. Proud, yes, but also tense, as if he were holding more than just a newborn. At the time, few questioned it. This was Meghan and Harry, after all. They were modern, private, unconventional. But what the public didn't know was that behind the scenes, palace aides were already struggling to make sense of conflicting timelines and private decisions that had bypassed royal protocol. Meghan had reportedly given birth at Portland Hospital in London, but staff there remained unusually tight-lipped. Even more curiously, when journalists attempted to obtain the standard registered birth certificate, as has always been available for royal births, they found the process unusually restricted. Still, the matter was quietly buried, until now. Years later, a journalist working on a seemingly benign story about royal documentation stumbled across a curious footnote while researching archived birth records. When following up with the hospital for official confirmation, a quiet yet unmistakable admission was made. There was no verified hospital-filed birth certificate on record for Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor. There had been entries, there had been statements, but no certified, independently verifiable hospital-issued documentation. Just a version filed retroactively and under questionable circumstances. This seemingly minor revelation unleashed a tidal wave inside Buckingham Palace. Because if there was no verified birth certificate, what did that mean for Archie's status? And more troublingly, had the palace, and by extension the British public, been lied to? King Charles, newly ascended and burdened with the task of stabilizing a monarchy increasingly under public scrutiny, had no choice but to act. The royal family's very lineage is not just ceremonial. It is legal, constitutional, and historical. Every birth matters. Every heir is documented to preserve the integrity of succession. And the revelation of an unverifiable birth certificate posed a risk not only to Archie's place in line, but to the monarchy's credibility around the globe. But this wasn't just about a missing document. As Charles would soon discover, it was the key that would unlock a storm of questions. Was there ever a real birth at the hospital? Were medical staff silenced under non-disclosure agreements? Why did Meghan Markle insist on such strict secrecy? And more explosively, was surrogacy involved? For years, Whispers about Meghan's pregnancy had lingered on the internet. Conspiracy theories, body double speculation, bizarre footage of collapsing bumps. These were dismissed as cruel and unfounded by mainstream outlets. But now, in light of a missing certificate, those whispers turned into thunderous suspicion, and they reached all the way to King Charles's private desk. As royal archivists and legal experts scrambled for answers, the question hung in the air like a blade. What happens when a royal birth, the cornerstone of monarchy, is built on sand? Behind closed doors, the fallout was immediate. Meghan reportedly demanded legal protection and blamed racism, sexism, and media bias. Harry, caught in the storm, was said to have pleaded for more time. Time to explain, time to fix what had unraveled. But the king had waited long enough. According to palace insiders, he declared that the truth must outweigh sentiment, and that the line of succession could no longer accommodate shadows and secrets. With a heavy heart and firm conviction, King Charles made the most controversial royal declaration in modern history. Meghan Markle and Archie Harrison would be formally removed from the royal lineage. The media went into meltdown. Supporters rallied in outrage. Critics claimed it was long overdue. Some said it was too soft. Others said it was a betrayal of a child. But for Charles, the decision was not about feelings. It was about protecting the institution he had waited his entire life to lead. And now, here we are, in a moment of unprecedented reckoning. What began as a joyous birth announcement has now become a constitutional crisis. The monarchy stands accused of either complicity or naivety. A mother stands accused of deception. A child, innocent and unaware, is at the center of a maelstrom of royal history, legal ambiguity, and public opinion. So how did we get here? What exactly did the hospitals say, and why did they say it now? What role did Doria Ragland play behind the scenes? What does this mean for the future of Harry and Meghan's relationship, with the royals, with the public, and even with each other? And perhaps most chillingly of all, what if Archie was never supposed to exist, at least not as a royal? These are the questions we'll unravel in the chapters ahead. With exclusive details, insider testimonies, leaked documents, and emotional accounts from those inside and outside the palace. This exposé will take you behind the curtain of one of the most controversial royal stories of our time. By the time we reach the final chapter, you'll have to ask yourself, was this a cover-up, a misunderstanding, or the greatest betrayal of royal trust in a generation? For a monarchy defined by tradition, formality, and precision, a missing piece of paper might seem inconsequential to some. But for the House of Windsor, a single unverified document, especially one as sacred as a royal birth certificate, can unravel centuries of legitimacy, protocol, and public trust in the blink of an eye. And that's exactly what happened when the official birth record of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was quietly revealed to be absent from the verified hospital archives. At first, it started as a routine request. A reporter working on a documentary about the modernization of the monarchy had decided to trace the registration patterns of royal births across generations. It was the kind of journalistic task that never made headlines. The public record of Prince William? Flawless. George, Charlotte, Louis? All documented with precision down to the hour, signed off by attending physicians, midwives, and approved witnesses. But when the same researcher reached out to the Portland hospital, the supposed location of Meghan Markle's delivery, something didn't add up. The hospital spokesperson issued a polite but cryptic reply. There was no verifiable birth certificate filed directly by hospital administration or medical personnel for Archie Harrison. What followed next wasn't the ringing of alarm bells, but a suffocating silence. The kind that only institutions steeped in centuries of discretion can maintain. The hospital's wording was deliberate. They didn't outright say the birth didn't happen there, but their refusal to confirm that their staff had ever authenticated or issued an official document raised a troubling specter. Had the record been created elsewhere? Was it issued retroactively? Was it legitimate? When confronted again with requests for clarity, the hospital's legal team stepped in. Communications were abruptly redirected through legal channels. Journalists were told to contact the royal household for questions related to the privacy of the royal child. But this only fueled the fire. The public had seen this before, not in the UK necessarily, but in celebrity circles. Stars who had gone to great lengths to mask surrogate births. high-profile figures who released staged photo shoots with newborns who hadn't yet taken their first breath. And in every case, secrecy always preceded scandal. The comparison was unflattering and dangerous. This wasn't a pop star. This was a child born seventh in line to the British throne. A child whose future, identity, and inheritance were bound to centuries of recorded history and legal precedent. And yet, here was a question with no official answer. Where was the paper? More troubling still, when journalists returned to the UK's General Register Office, where all birth records are kept and made publicly available for a small fee, what they found only deepened the mystery. A certificate was indeed present, but it bore inconsistencies. Meghan's name, initially listed as Rachel Meghan Markle, was later amended to read Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, omitting her given names entirely. Palace sources at the time claimed this change was made at the behest of royal aides. But later, Meghan's spokesperson denied this, insisting the change was made without her request and without her consent. The contradiction sparked speculation that the certificate was altered after the fact to either obscure or legitimize certain elements of the birth and protect against scrutiny. Was it a clerical error, an attempt at uniformity, or a calculated move to rewrite the narrative in real time? Adding fuel to the fire, no medical personnel from the birth have ever publicly spoken about the event. In previous royal births, especially those within modern memory, the attending physicians were often named, praised, and even honored. But for Archie's birth, no one was ever officially acknowledged. There were no photos of staff leaving the hospital, no confirmation from obstetricians, and no detailed breakdown of the delivery, aside from a generic statement issued days later. This silence, in isolation, could be dismissed as a couple's desire for privacy. But coupled with the birth certificate irregularities and the Portland hospital's refusal to confirm a verifiable record, it began to look less like discretion and more like a deliberate obfuscation. The question was, why? Inside royal circles, questions were being asked quietly. Senior courtiers began requesting private reviews of the documentation. Former aides who were involved in drafting the press release about Archie's birth reported that key details had been withheld from them. One insider, speaking under strict anonymity, admitted that they were asked to send out a birth announcement after they had been informed that Meghan and Harry had already returned home, a bizarre timeline that left them baffled. Even the official time of birth raised eyebrows. Archie's birth was reportedly at 5:26 a.m., but the press release was issued nearly 9 hours later, and it was worded as though Meghan had just gone into labor. Why the deception? Why mislead the public about something so basic? Royal correspondents began to suspect that this timeline wasn't a mistake, it was engineered. And if the timing was deliberately manipulated, then perhaps the rest of the story had been as well. Over the years, conspiracy theories around Meghan's pregnancy had gained momentum online, many of them far-fetched and mean-spirited. But now, those theories were being revisited with a more critical lens. Analysts began comparing photos of Meghan throughout her pregnancy, noting how her baby bump appeared to change shape dramatically in short spans of time. In one video, as she bent down to greet a child, her abdomen seemed to fold unnaturally. Footage that went viral labeled everything from a fabric fold to evidence of a prosthetic bump. At the time, such claims were written off as hateful internet noise. But in light of the missing paper trail, those same videos resurfaced with a new, darker context. What if Meghan had staged parts of her pregnancy? What if a surrogate had given birth, and the couple had managed to legally register the baby as theirs, but under different conditions? The implications were massive. If surrogacy had taken place and was concealed from the royal household, it could amount to a direct violation of the trust the monarchy holds with its people. Not because surrogacy is inherently wrong, but because secrecy and dishonesty, especially around lineage, strike at the core of royal legitimacy. King Charles, once famously outspoken about streamlining the monarchy, was now faced with an existential dilemma. The future of the House of Windsor had already been tested by scandal, tragedy, and political upheaval. But this was different. This was not about opinion or personality. This was about fact, tangible, legal fact. A missing piece of paper that either confirmed or collapsed a royal child's place in the line of succession. It's worth remembering that the royal lineage isn't merely symbolic. Each name on the succession list represents potential access to the crown, state support, and constitutional privilege. Archie's position, while not imminent, was still embedded in official government documents. He was listed in legal texts. His name, alongside those of his cousins, had been submitted for consideration in various Commonwealth recognitions. If his birth was unverifiable, if it was shrouded in questions the monarchy could not answer, then his continued presence on the royal family's books became a legal and ethical liability. As lawyers, historians, and constitutional scholars began to weigh in, the matter evolved from mere gossip to a full-blown crisis. Petitions were circulated, asking Parliament to review succession laws. Tabloids, once cautious about repeating fringe theories, now dedicated front pages to deep dives on the birth certificate saga. A documentary series was greenlit. Even American networks began covering the controversy with increasing intensity. And yet, through it all, Meghan and Harry remained silent. No statements, no interviews, no clarifications. It was this silence, some said, that proved the most damning. And within Buckingham Palace, a decision loomed, one that would change the monarchy forever. There is a saying often murmured within the walls of royal institutions, one passed down from the Queen's generation to palace aides and senior officials alike. Consistency is the currency of trust. For over a millennium, the British monarchy has survived scandal, war, and rebellion not just by virtue of tradition, but by ensuring that its words aligned with its actions. Precision and clarity weren't optional, they were sacred. But when it comes to Meghan Markle's account of Archie's birth, the waters have never been still. In fact, they've shifted so frequently, so dramatically, that even seasoned royal reporters struggled to keep their timeline straight. From the beginning, Meghan's version of events was an outlier. While other royal mothers before her, from Diana to Kate, followed a predictable, publicly accessible pattern, Meghan insisted on doing things differently. At first, this seemed refreshing, a break from stifling rigidity. But as time passed, her desire for privacy evolved into something more peculiar: secrecy. And with secrecy came confusion. And with confusion came contradictions. Let's rewind to the moment before Archie's arrival. In early 2019, multiple outlets were briefed that Meghan would give birth at the Lindo wing of St. Mary's Hospital, the same place where Kate had delivered George, Charlotte, and Louis. Royal watchers prepared for the familiar sight of the polished steps, the red dress, the waving crowd. But within days of the announcement, the narrative shifted. Reports suddenly emerged that Meghan was considering a home birth at Frogmore Cottage. Then, without further clarity, it was stated that Meghan and Harry would not be sharing details of the birth until they had had time to celebrate privately. The public accepted this as a modern couple's choice, until the day of Archie's birth came and went with no confirmed hospital, no images, and an oddly worded press release issued by Buckingham Palace 9 hours after the supposed time of delivery. It stated that Meghan had gone into labor when, in fact, by then she had already given birth. Why was the palace instructed to release a deliberately misleading statement? Who decided on the delay? And what happened in the hours between Archie's alleged delivery and the public announcement? More troubling was the press briefing that followed, conducted at Windsor Castle. Meghan and Harry emerged for a carefully staged photo opportunity, baby Archie in Harry's arms, Meghan beaming in a white dress. It was all so perfectly orchestrated that many missed what wasn't there. No medical team, no hospital backdrop, no details about labor, birth weight, or complications. Nothing that traditionally accompanies a royal birth reveal. In the weeks following, when pressed by journalists, Meghan gave a vague answer about labor. In one interview, she remarked that every woman's experience is different, and she was grateful for the support she had received. But she offered no specifics. There was no official statement from attending doctors, no confirmation from hospital staff. Even the choice of hospital, Portland Hospital, was only acknowledged after the fact, and even then, not by the palace, but through media investigations. And yet, even this location remained questionable. Multiple Portland Hospital employees have reportedly stated, off the record, that they never saw Meghan enter or leave through standard patient access points. There were no signed log sheets by her security detail, and more curiously, the hospital was never credited in any official communication. For a private institution that thrives on prestige and exclusivity, Being able to say they delivered a royal baby would have been a badge of honor. But Portland Hospital never capitalized on it. Not once. As speculation grew, Meghan's representatives began modifying the story. At one point, it was said that she had briefly considered a home birth but opted for a hospital due to safety. Later, an anonymous source close to the couple claimed the hospital birth was planned from the beginning, and that secrecy was necessary due to security threats. But these backpedals only raised more questions. Why would security be tighter for Meghan than for Kate, a future queen consort? Why didn't Harry's protection team issue their own clarification? Why weren't there any eyewitnesses? Meanwhile, Meghan's public appearances during her pregnancy began to face scrutiny. Social media lit up with clips from her time at various events, where her baby bump appeared to change in size and position from one frame to the next. At the National Theatre, for example, her bump seemed significantly larger than it had appeared just a few days earlier. During a charity visit, video footage showed the bump shifting awkwardly under her dress when she crouched, fueling theories that what the world was seeing wasn't a natural pregnancy at all. When asked about the online speculation, Meghan's allies dismissed it as misogyny and racism, attacks meant to undermine her status and dignity. And while many in the media agreed that such scrutiny was cruel, it didn't fully explain why the inconsistencies were never directly addressed. Things became even murkier when, nearly 2 years later, Meghan gave a wide-ranging interview to Oprah Winfrey. In it, she spoke emotionally about mental health, racism, and her disillusionment with the royal institution. But when asked about Archie's birth, her answers were oddly sterile. She described it as a joyful moment and spoke about introducing him to the Queen and Prince Philip. But again, no discussion of the hospital, the labor, or the birth certificate confusion. When Oprah asked more detailed questions, Meghan pivoted, as if guided to avoid specifics. Critics began to wonder if Meghan was strategically vague. That every story, every quote, every interview had been polished to avoid the kind of factual grounding that could later be disproven. This theory gained momentum when, in mid-2021, an official birth certificate for Lilibet Diana was released in the United States, and it was remarkably straightforward. Listed birthplace, hospital, parents, signatures, all accounted for. It raised a crucial question. Why had Meghan been so open about Lilibet, but so elusive about Archie? There's another layer to this. In legal cases involving identity fraud or citizenship disputes, courts often rely on primary birth records from hospitals. If no such document exists for Archie, or if the record was created outside of standard legal protocol, it could pose serious issues for inheritance, diplomatic recognition, and even travel status. Was this the reason King Charles began his quiet legal review? Reports suggest that around the time Charles assumed the throne, palace staff began reviewing archived royal documents to prepare for his coronation. As part of that process, each royal family member's legal status and title lineage had to be verified. When aides requested certified documents for Archie, what they received was a redacted file, one that lacked medical signatures or a hospital seal. It was flagged immediately, and that flag, sources say, landed directly on the king's desk. At that moment, what had once been gossip became institutional concern. To complicate matters further, a whistleblower, allegedly a former administrative assistant within the Sussex household, leaked a series of emails suggesting that Meghan had fought to retain creative control over all public-facing narratives surrounding Archie's birth. These emails, though not verified by major outlets, hinted that Meghan had planned every step of the press strategy and had specifically instructed her team to avoid traditional media channels and instead favor curated releases. One email even referenced the idea that optics outweigh logistics. But no amount of optics could override one glaring absence: verifiable facts. In the absence of medical confirmation, hospital registration, and transparency, people were left to form their own conclusions. And Meghan's shifting stories only made matters worse. In court documents submitted during her legal battles with British tabloids, Meghan at one point referenced a birth plan that allegedly involved a doula and midwife team, again contradicting the hospital narrative. So which version is true? Did Meghan deliver Archie naturally at Portland Hospital in the early hours of May 6, 2019? Did she give birth at home in secret, as some suggest? Or was there no biological birth at all, and Archie was born through surrogacy, hidden behind layers of public relations maneuvering? Whatever the truth is, it's clear that Meghan's storytelling, while emotionally compelling, has only served to deepen suspicion rather than resolve it. And for a royal figure, narrative is not enough. In the world of monarchies and titles, documentation is everything. The implications of these shifting narratives go far beyond public curiosity. They speak to the heart of royal legitimacy. And now, as King Charles begins to draw lines in the sand, the inconsistencies in Meghan's accounts may be used not just to justify removal from the royal family, but to preserve the integrity of the crown itself. The British monarchy, for all its pomp and ceremonial splendor, operates on a foundation of structure, secrecy, and silent signals. What the public sees, the waving from the balcony, the royal weddings, the state dinners, is just the surface. Beneath that surface lies an intricate system of advisors, aides, courtiers, and private secretaries who serve not only the monarch, but the very survival of the institution. It is within this hidden world that whispers are louder than proclamations, and investigations begin long before the press ever catches a scent of scandal. And when it came to Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, those whispers started early. In the days following Archie's birth, something felt different behind palace walls. Staffers spoke in hushed tones. Emails were marked strictly confidential, and certain departments were suddenly instructed to reroute any requests for birth-related documents directly to the Queen's private secretary. This wasn't routine. This was a lockdown, not for national security, but for secrecy. According to a retired senior footman who served during Queen Elizabeth II's final years, the tension around Archie's birth was palpable. Everyone was walking on eggshells. Normally, when a royal baby is born, there's joy, buzzing around, preparations, updates, flowers, celebrations. But with Archie, it was silence. Like everyone was told to keep their mouths shut and their heads down. At the heart of the unease was a peculiar absence of clarity. Courtiers tasked with updating the royal family's official records reportedly found that there was no certified hospital file sent over through the usual secure channels. Normally, once a royal baby is born, a registered nurse or attending doctor provides documentation, which is then hand-delivered by royal security to a designated record keeper within the palace. That document is entered into the royal archives, where it is kept under lock and key, available only to the reigning monarch and a select few officials. But in Archie's case, the documentation never came. Instead, there was a copy of a public record. The same document later discovered by journalists, showing the name alteration and the suspicious lack of medical signatures. When aides followed up with the Sussex household, they were met with evasive replies. One high-ranking staffer, who served under Prince Charles at the time, said, "It wasn't just that they didn't have the documents. It was the attitude, like they didn't think we needed to know, as if the rules didn't apply to them." Inside the palace, this attitude caused unease. But questioning Meghan and Harry directly was a political minefield. After all, the couple had already begun to distance themselves from royal expectations. Meghan, in particular, was known to bristle at protocol, and Harry, once the palace's cheeky and beloved prince, had grown increasingly defensive when it came to his wife. But the inconsistencies couldn't be ignored, especially as the Queen began to take stock of the institution's future in her advancing age. Behind the scenes, Queen Elizabeth summoned her Lord Chamberlain, the most senior official in the royal household, and requested a discreet internal audit of all documentation related to Archie's birth. According to an internal memo later leaked to royal commentators, the purpose was to verify the formal details of lineage and succession for archival and legal accuracy. The wording was careful, non-accusatory, but the implication was clear: something wasn't adding up. This internal audit triggered a quiet flurry of activity. Royal archivists combed through existing documentation. Legal advisors reviewed the constitutional implications of a royal heir born without verified records. Officials reached out to Portland Hospital requesting cooperation. The response? A blanket statement citing privacy concerns and an unwillingness to disclose patient information without a court order or consent from the patient. That roadblock raised immediate red flags. The palace had always maintained a level of mutual respect and collaboration with key institutions, especially hospitals involved in royal care. The abrupt stonewalling suggested that legal agreements, possibly NDAs, had been signed in advance, perhaps even before the birth itself. This theory gained traction when the royal security team assigned to Harry and Meghan was asked to submit a report on their movements that week. According to a security official, who later spoke anonymously to the media, there was an inconsistency in the records. There was no timestamp, no CCTV trail from Portland Hospital on the morning Archie was born. That's unusual. We log every entry, every exit. If a principal goes into a secured building, it's documented. But for Meghan, that morning, there's nothing. It was becoming clear to palace insiders that either Meghan had not given birth at Portland Hospital or that she had entered and exited through non-standard channels. An act that would have required pre-coordinated security arrangements and secrecy at the highest levels. As suspicions deepened, internal factions began to form. On one side were the traditionalists, senior royals, and aides who believed transparency and order were paramount. Figures like Princess Ind, known for her no-nonsense approach, allegedly raised concerns about Archie's status behind closed doors. According to insiders, and had always been wary of Meghan's theatrical approach to royalty and saw the lack of documentation as a serious problem. On the other side were the protectors, those who felt that Harry's role as the late Diana's son afforded him special leeway. They argued that Meghan had been targeted unfairly by the media, and that any scrutiny around Archie's birth would only pour fuel on the tabloid fire. Prince Andrew, despite his own legal troubles, was reportedly among those who cautioned against further inquiry. Not out of loyalty, but out of fear that more scandal would destabilize the institution he was already dragging down. Caught in the middle was Prince William, who understood the stakes better than anyone. As future king, his role demanded both compassion and leadership. But he also knew that if Archie's status was called into question, it would have a ripple effect, not just on the Sussexes, but on the entire royal hierarchy. In private, William is said to have supported the audit but urged discretion. "We mustn't allow this to become public," he reportedly told a senior aide. It would destroy Harry. But control was slipping. By this time, the tabloids had caught wind of the tension. Rumors began surfacing on royal blogs and alternative media sites. The term invisible baby began trending. Speculation about surrogacy re-emerged with greater intensity. And all the while, neither Meghan nor Harry made any effort to confront the rumors head-on. Instead, their strategy appeared to be silence or distraction. Public appearances continued. Meghan launched a podcast. Harry promoted a mental health series. They appeared on stage at global summits, embraced causes, and leaned into their image as modern philanthropists. But every time they stepped onto a public platform, the question lingered like a ghost at their side. Where was the proof? In response, Buckingham Palace escalated their review. With the Queen's health declining and Charles preparing to assume greater responsibility, a formal team of legal experts was assembled under the direction of the Privy Council. Their task was specific: determine whether Archie Harrison's name could be legally and constitutionally recognized in the line of succession without verified birth records. What they discovered, or didn't discover, reportedly shocked them. According to one source close to the legal team, not only was the original hospital certificate missing, but so were key corroborating documents. No physician's affidavit, no midwife's statement, no formal registration by a certified official from Portland Hospital. In their place were photocopies, unsworn letters, and references to unnamed medical professionals who could not be reached for comment. The conclusion was grim. From a legal standpoint, Archie's birth could not be independently verified through standard royal or British legal processes. For a private citizen, such gaps might be inconvenient. For a royal, it was catastrophic. At this point, the whisper network within the palace had become a roar. Discussions were no longer hypothetical. Real consequences were being debated. Could Archie be quietly removed from the official royal website? Should a formal announcement be made? What about his titles? His inheritance rights? And most critically, what was King Charles going to do? While still Prince of Wales at the time of the audit, Charles had long expressed interest in slimming down the monarchy. He believed in clarity, efficiency, order. The drama surrounding Meghan and Harry had already complicated his transition into power. But now, he was being handed a legitimate reason to act. to draw a line between duty and sentiment. And so, in the final months of Queen Elizabeth's life, a resolution was drafted, one that would wait in a locked drawer until the time was right. In the shadowy world of royal scandal, few figures remain as enigmatic as Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle's mother and, by many accounts, the only person Meghan fully trusts. While the rest of Meghan's family has either been estranged or publicly critical, Doria has always stood quietly in her daughter's corner. She's been portrayed in the media as dignified, composed, and loyal, the calm in the storm. But as the mystery surrounding Archie's birth deepened and inconsistencies multiplied, a once unthinkable question began to echo through palace halls. How much did Doria know? And more chillingly, was she actively involved in keeping secrets? To understand Doria's role in the unfolding drama, we must rewind to the months leading up to Archie's birth. Meghan was heavily pregnant, newly settled into Frogmore Cottage, and navigating an increasingly strained relationship with the palace. According to aides at the time, Meghan had become guarded and territorial, fiercely controlling the narrative around her pregnancy. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Staff were required to sign extended NDAs. Even long-serving palace employees were suddenly shut out of the usual communication loops. Amid this isolation, one person remained closely embedded: Doria. Sources confirmed that Doria moved into Frogmore Cottage with Meghan in the final weeks of her pregnancy. Officially, she was there to support her daughter, a natural role for a grandmother-to-be. But her presence was not casual. It was full-time, discreet, and tightly managed. According to a staff member at Windsor, Doria was treated more like a private consultant than a guest. She took meetings on Meghan's behalf. She communicated with select members of the press. And, more curiously, she reportedly had access to security briefings, an unusual privilege for a non-royal, non-official figure. So what was Doria's real role? Was she simply a supportive mother, or was she involved in shaping the story behind the most mysterious royal birth in modern history? Let's look at the timeline. By mid-April 2019, palace insiders reported that Meghan had begun rejecting suggestions from royal doctors and midwives. The tradition, going back decades, involved at least one member of the royal medical team being present during a birth, or at the very least, coordinating with hospital staff. Meghan reportedly refused this. She wanted her own team. Doria, a trained yoga instructor and former social worker, was said to be closely involved in those decisions. One source described Doria as protective to a fault. She didn't trust palace staff, and she certainly didn't trust the media. While those instincts might have been understandable, they also created a wall of secrecy around Meghan that blocked even essential logistical details from reaching royal hands. This wall thickened in the first days of May. Meghan had stopped making public appearances, and speculation swirled that she had already given birth. But no official word came from the palace. Behind closed doors, aides were scrambling. They had no updates from the Sussex household, no notification of labor, and, crucially, no access to Meghan's private medical team. Then, on May 6th, an email arrived from a private account. The message was brief and emotionless. The Duchess of Sussex has delivered a male child at 5:26 a.m. Mother and child are healthy. No hospital was listed. No doctor signed the message. And yet, it was sent on behalf of a royal. Even more shocking, according to an aide who reviewed the email, the sender was not Harry. It wasn't even one of Meghan's assistants. It was Doria. Why would Meghan's mother be the one to alert the palace about a royal birth? Why was there no accompanying medical confirmation? And why was the message so coldly clinical? These questions might have faded into speculation had it not been for what followed. When journalists began requesting standard birth information from Portland Hospital, they were rebuffed. Some received no reply. Others were redirected. A few were told, quietly, that the hospital had signed confidentiality agreements that went beyond typical patient discretion. Doria's name began appearing again, this time in connection with those agreements. A leaked memo from a law firm representing the hospital showed a client listed only as D. Ragland, acting as liaison for H&M. The document outlined communication protocols, privacy conditions, and enforcement clauses related to press inquiries. While it's not uncommon for high-profile figures to engage legal intermediaries to protect their privacy, the detail that raised eyebrows was Doria's role as liaison. Why was she acting as a gatekeeper on behalf of a royal couple in a matter as sensitive as a birth? Was she managing press strategy? Or was she actively involved in something deeper? Speculation intensified when royal security teams discovered that surveillance footage from Portland Hospital's private entrance, a security-controlled zone, had been wiped clean for a 48-hour window surrounding May 6th. While data purges do occur, especially in high-security cases, they are rarely performed without formal requests. A security contractor later admitted, under parliamentary questioning, that the request had come from an American legal representative affiliated with the subject's family. Was this coincidence? Or was Doria, with her calm demeanor and silent presence, orchestrating a strategy of concealment on a much grander scale? Some argue Doria was merely trying to protect her daughter from the trauma of royal scrutiny. Meghan had suffered intense media attacks. Her relationship with her father, Thomas Markle, had deteriorated publicly. She was under pressure from every side. Perhaps Doria simply wanted to shield her from more pain. But others aren't convinced. Critics say Doria's involvement went far beyond maternal concern. That her role in managing legal documents, fielding emails, and negotiating NDAs suggests active participation in controlling or manipulating the narrative. There's another point to consider. In nearly all royal births, the maternal grandmother has played a supportive but secondary role. Carol Middleton was photographed visiting Kate in the hospital. Queen Elizabeth herself stayed out of the delivery room when her children were born. But Doria? She was allegedly present from start to finish and remained at Meghan's side long after Archie was introduced to the world. When Charles and Camilla arrived to meet Archie, Doria was reportedly the one who greeted them at the door. Some claim she even facilitated the brief photo op at Windsor Castle, where Harry and Meghan introduced Archie to the press. Palace aides were reportedly excluded from coordinating the event, and some suspect this was due to Doria's insistence on total narrative control. So what does this all add up to? On the surface, Doria Ragland remains a picture of dignity and discretion. She has never given an interview, never sold a story, never spoken against the royals. But her silence may be more strategic than saintly. It's possible, even likely, that she was the only person outside Meghan and Harry's inner circle who knew the full truth about Archie's birth. And if the reports are true, if the documents were crafted carefully, if the birth was concealed, if NDAs were used to silence medical staff, then Doria wasn't just a witness. She was a participant. Palace insiders now view Doria with suspicion, even as they remain outwardly respectful. In official documents, she's still listed as the maternal grandmother. But behind closed doors, her name is often spoken with a mix of wariness and regret. "We should have known," one senior aide reportedly said. She wasn't just supporting Meghan, she was running the show. Whether out of love or ambition, Doria Ragland's influence on one of the most controversial royal births in history cannot be denied. And as the fallout continues to ripple through the House of Windsor, the line between motherly protection and calculated involvement grows thinner by the day. There are scandals that simmer quietly beneath the surface. Whispers, rumors, half-truths. Then there are those that refuse to die, no matter how many times they are denied, buried, or brushed aside. For Meghan Markle, the specter of surrogacy has always hovered just beyond the frame. It started as a fringe theory, dismissed by the mainstream press as malicious speculation. But in the absence of transparency, that theory has not only endured, it has reignited with a fury. The allegations first emerged during Meghan's pregnancy in 2018 to 2019. What began as subtle observations about the shape and positioning of her baby bump evolved into intense scrutiny of her public appearances. Some clips were dissected frame by frame, slowed down, zoomed in, and what people claimed to see shocked them. Footage of Meghan crouching down caused her bump to shift unnaturally, fold inwards, or even disappear momentarily. To critics, these movements weren't consistent with a natural pregnancy. They were seen as evidence of a prosthetic bump, a decoy. Still, many dismissed this as nonsense, the product of overactive imaginations, or, worse, racist and misogynistic hate campaigns. And for a time, that's how it stayed. The press avoided the topic. Mainstream networks refused to entertain the idea. And yet, the videos kept circulating, racking up millions of views across alternative platforms. And with every rewatch, the questions grew harder to ignore. What truly gave these allegations new life, however, wasn't the internet conspiracy crowd. It was the undeniable inconsistencies that began surfacing in official channels. A missing birth certificate. A lack of medical confirmation. No known obstetrician. No nurses speaking out. No details of labor. No hospital staff honored by the palace. All of these deviations from royal tradition began to paint a picture that looked, at best, secretive, and at worst, deceptive. By the time the hospital confirmed no verifiable birth documentation had been filed for Archie, the surrogacy theory was no longer confined to dark corners of the web. It was now being discussed by mainstream commentators, legal analysts, and even former royal aides. What had once been dismissed as rumor was now being revisited as a legitimate line of inquiry. What makes surrogacy such a sensitive issue in royal circles? It isn't the practice itself. Surrogacy, after all, is a deeply personal and often medically necessary path to parenthood. But in the context of monarchy, lineage, legitimacy, and public trust, it becomes far more complex. The British royal family operates under centuries-old traditions that prioritize bloodlines, hereditary rights, and official documentation. Every heir to the throne must be verifiably born of a royal parent. Any deviation from that tradition, particularly one hidden from public record, could potentially delegitimize not only a child's title, but also their place in the line of succession. And so, the question stands. Was Archie born via a surrogate? The evidence is circumstantial but accumulating. Let's begin with the timeline. Meghan's pregnancy was announced in October 2018, just as she and Harry embarked on their tour of Australia. At the time, she appeared slim and energetic. Just weeks later, her baby bump was visibly pronounced, more so than typically seen in early stages. Some noted how quickly she popped. Others noticed how the bump seemed to grow and shrink from one appearance to the next. By January 2019, Meghan appeared at multiple events, each time dressed in loose-fitting outfits that nonetheless clung tightly to an oddly shaped bump. Critics pointed out moments where the bump seemed to sit unnaturally high or low depending on her posture. In one viral clip from a charity event, Meghan bent down to greet a child, and the bump appeared to shift in an unusual way, flattening, folding, and reinflating as she stood. Theories exploded. Was it a moon bump, a silicone pregnancy prosthetic? Was she wearing padding to disguise the use of a surrogate? Some speculated that the real pregnancy was being hidden to protect a surrogate's identity. Others believed the entire thing was a fabrication, that Meghan was never pregnant at all. Photos weren't the only source of controversy. Her hands, arms, and facial structure showed no signs of expected weight gain. There were no reports of morning sickness, no hospital visits for checkups, no published photos of her entering or exiting maternity clinics. Even palace staff, who were used to accommodating pregnant royals, were reportedly cut off from Meghan's daily routine. Then came the birth, or rather, the absence of one. As documented in previous chapters, no footage exists of Meghan entering a hospital. No photographic evidence of Harry carrying a car seat. No statements from doctors. No confirmation from nurses. The photo op at Windsor Castle, which was intended to quell suspicion, did the opposite. Meghan appeared in a stark white dress with a perfectly flat stomach just 48 hours after allegedly giving birth. Her figure was slimmer than it had been just weeks before. Her glow seemed untouched by labor. Most mothers would not look so pristine 2 days after delivery, especially not after a supposed natural birth. But Meghan did, and people noticed. While optics are subjective, medical documentation is not. And this is where the allegations begin to feel less like gossip and more like legal concern. If a surrogate was used, did Meghan and Harry inform the palace? Was the surrogate British or American? Were legal steps taken to formalize the adoption? Was there an agreement in place to protect the surrogate's identity? And if so, did that agreement override the monarchy's responsibility to provide transparent succession records? One former palace legal advisor, speaking under condition of anonymity, confirmed that any royal child born via surrogate would require special approval by the Privy Council to retain succession rights. This approval is contingent on full documentation and disclosure. Without it, the child's title could be rendered void. No such approval was ever recorded for Archie. Then there's the matter of insurance. When royal family members use private hospitals, their expenses are typically covered through a combination of private wealth and royal insurance protections. Portland Hospital, known for its elite services and stringent paperwork, would have required identification and registration, especially for a delivery involving VIPs and additional security. And yet, when investigators followed up, there was no verifiable insurance record connected to the name Meghan Markle or the Duchess of Sussex during the time of Archie's birth. This discovery sent investigators back to square one. If the hospital had no insurance record, no timestamp of entry or exit, and no surveillance footage due to wiped security data, was Meghan ever there? Or was someone else brought in under confidentiality agreements? The most explosive theory is that a surrogate, either in the UK or the United States, delivered Archie in a private, undisclosed location. From there, legal arrangements were made to register him as Harry and Meghan's son under special parentage laws that exist in select U.S. states. If true, this would explain the lack of British medical documentation. It would also explain the palace's inability to produce certified proof. The idea of international surrogacy raises further complications. Would Archie, born outside of the UK, still qualify for succession? Would he need to be naturalized through royal decree? Would the Queen, or now King Charles, have had to sign off on such a process? The answer, yes. And there is no record of such a decree being issued. This puts King Charles in a legal and constitutional bind. As monarch, he is the guardian of royal legitimacy. He is responsible for maintaining the line of succession, protecting the crown's credibility, and upholding the constitutional framework. If a member of the royal family bypassed those rules, even with good intentions, it could threaten the entire system. Sources within the palace suggest Charles has known about the possibility of surrogacy since early 2020. At first, it was dismissed as rumor. Then, it was deemed irrelevant as long as the child remained outside the working royal family. But as the birth certificate scandal unfolded and the hospital confirmed a lack of records, Charles's advisors reportedly urged a deeper investigation. That investigation has now reportedly confirmed what many feared. There is no medical evidence to support the claim that Meghan gave birth to Archie. No physician has come forward. No midwife has confirmed involvement. The certificate that exists is retroactive and unsigned by hospital staff. The circumstances are, at best, opaque. At worst, intentionally fabricated. Meghan's defenders argue that the obsession with her pregnancy is rooted in racism, sexism, and classism. That royal traditionalists refuse to accept an American woman of color into the most exclusive institution in Britain. And while there is truth to the discrimination she faced, those arguments cannot erase inconsistencies in documentation or absence of legal procedure. If anything, it was the secrecy, not the surrogacy, that turned a private matter into a constitutional crisis. The surrogacy allegations, now reignited in the wake of hospital confirmation, have reached a boiling point. Legal teams are involved. Royal decrees are being considered. And King Charles, known for his deep concern for legacy, is facing the hardest choice of his reign so far. It is often said that the monarchy does not act quickly. It moves at the pace of tradition. But there are rare moments in royal history when slow deliberation must give way to swift precision. The discovery of an unverifiable birth certificate for Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor was one of those moments. For King Charles III, a man who had waited a lifetime to wear the crown, the scandal presented not just a personal dilemma involving his son and grandson, but a constitutional crisis that threatened to stain the very institution he now led. From the outside, the royal family's response appeared calm. No official statements were made. No press conferences. No off-the-cuff remarks to waiting reporters. But inside Clarence House and Buckingham Palace, the gears of the monarchy's most discreet and powerful arm began turning. The legal team was summoned. At the center of this private operation was Sir Thomas Renly, the king's most trusted legal advisor and the clerk of the Privy Council. Known for his razor-sharp intellect and unshakable discretion, Sir Thomas had served under Queen Elizabeth II for nearly 2 decades and was quietly kept in place during Charles's transition. He had handled everything from estate disputes to controversial constitutional guidance. But this, a question of royal lineage, was unlike anything he had ever faced. His first move was to gather the facts. According to leaked records reviewed later by royal commentators, the legal review began with a deep dive into the royal line of succession. Names, titles, and birth records were analyzed for legal integrity. Archie's profile, however, quickly stood out as a red flag, not because of who he was, but because of what was missing, namely, verified documentation. The legal team examined the birth certificate on file. They found no trace of the document being authenticated through Portland Hospital's normal channels. No signatures from licensed practitioners. No medical details verifying a live birth. The certificate had been filed days after the reported birth date and appeared to have been submitted through a private intermediary. Worse, the hospital had now confirmed it could not independently verify the document. Next came the question of the line of succession. Under the 2013 Succession to the Crown Act, all individuals with a direct bloodline to the monarch are included in the line unless specific exclusions apply. These exclusions are usually due to religious affiliation or criminal actions, but the law assumes, and depends, on the validity of birth records to determine eligibility. If Archie's birth could not be proven through legally recognized means, his position in the succession line was rendered vulnerable, if not invalid. Sir Thomas, understanding the delicacy of the matter, advised the king to proceed with extreme caution. This was not just a family issue, it was a legal precedent. To alter the line of succession without due process could ignite political controversy, but to ignore it could damage the monarchy's reputation beyond repair. Thus, a three-phase legal strategy was quietly initiated behind closed doors. Phase 1. Verification. Sir Thomas returned to the king with his findings. The absence of a verified birth record. The refusal of Portland Hospital to cooperate. The legal precedent confirming that unverifiable lineage disqualified a person from succession. The Privy Council was then notified of the situation under the Code, Monarch's Lineage Advisory Review, a cryptic designation that would allow the case to be tracked without raising alarm. King Charles was devastated. Despite the media's frequent portrayal of him as cold and calculated, Charles has long been described by those closest to him as deeply emotional, particularly when it comes to his sons. The rift between him and Harry was already painful. To face the possibility that his grandson, innocent of any wrongdoing, might have been used in a broader scheme of deception was nearly unbearable. According to palace insiders, Charles spent a full day alone at Balmoral after receiving Sir Thomas's final report. He took long walks through the estate, barely speaking to staff. When he returned, he was said to have looked gaunt, as though the burden of kingship had aged him 10 years overnight. But Charles was not just a father or grandfather. He was the sovereign, and as sovereign, he had a duty to act. Sir Thomas proposed a formal letter to be sent to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex requesting clarification and cooperation. This letter would request, in legal but respectful terms, any additional documentation that could verify the circumstances of Archie's birth. It would also advise them that, in the absence of such documentation, the Crown would be required to take procedural steps to adjust the official line of succession. The letter was drafted, sealed, and sent via diplomatic courier to Montecito, California. Days passed, then a week. No response. A follow-up letter was issued, this time with a 30-day deadline and a legal advisory attached. Meghan and Harry, according to sources close to the palace, ignored it. Instead, Meghan's legal team allegedly fired back with a cease and desist letter, accusing the palace of institutional harassment and targeted discrimination. The language was aggressive, politicized, and fueled the belief that Meghan had no intention of cooperating, because she knew what cooperation would expose. Faced with this stonewall, the king convened a private session of senior royal advisors and constitutional lawyers. Together, they reviewed their options. The solution, while painful, was now unavoidable. A formal memorandum would be issued from the Court of St. James, stating that due to the lack of verifiable documentation, and in accordance with constitutional tradition and legal precedent, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor would be removed from the official line of succession. Additionally, all references to royal titles associated with him would be rendered honorary but non-constitutional. The document would not accuse Meghan or Harry of wrongdoing. It would not use inflammatory language, but its implications would be seismic. In the memo's final draft, prepared for the king's signature, one sentence stood out as the gravest marker of this modern royal drama. In the interest of preserving the constitutional integrity of the monarchy, and in the absence of verifiable legal records, the Crown hereby acknowledges that Master Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor shall no longer be considered within the royal succession line until such time that legal evidence may support his restoration. The document was signed by King Charles III on a rainy afternoon in London. According to one royal witness, he placed the pen down, closed the folder slowly, and stared out the window for several minutes before whispering to himself, "God forgive me." For a man born into global attention, Prince Harry has always wrestled with the cost of visibility. From the moment he took his first steps behind palace gates, the world watched him. First as the mischievous Spare, the red-haired rebel with a cheeky grin. Then as the soldier prince, carving his path in Afghanistan, finally earning a reputation beyond tabloids and tiaras. And later, as a husband and father trying to redefine royalty on his own terms. But now, with his wife under scrutiny, his son's lineage questioned, and the monarchy turning its gaze inward, Prince Harry has grown unrecognizably silent and deeply isolated. It began slowly. At first, Harry was defiant. When the media questioned the secrecy surrounding Archie's birth, he snapped back. When the tabloids hinted at inconsistencies in Meghan's pregnancy, he threatened lawsuits. His message was clear. This was his family, his story, and he would defend it at any cost. But behind the bravado, cracks were forming, and those closest to him saw them first. According to friends who've known Harry since his army days, the turning point came not with the media, but with the palace. Specifically, the day he learned that King Charles had ordered a legal investigation into Archie's birth records. That moment, say insiders, shattered what little trust remained between father and son. Harry had always harbored resentment toward the royal institution, for failing to protect his mother, for policing his emotions, for forcing him into a role he never truly wanted. But despite everything, he believed his father would never cross a certain line, that no matter the tension, Charles would never question his child, his blood, his legacy. He was wrong. The news hit Harry in a Montecito garden, far away from London, as he reviewed morning press summaries with Meghan. A single headline stood out: Palace investigates Archie's birth documentation, legal questions mount. The article cited anonymous palace aides and hinted at possible removal from the line of succession. Harry, according to a source present that morning, went silent for several minutes, then stormed inside, slamming the door behind him. It wasn't the first time his faith in the institution had been shaken, but this felt different. Personal. Betraying. In the weeks that followed, Harry withdrew. His public appearances dwindled. Meetings were postponed. Even his work with the Invictus Games, a lifelong passion project, took a back seat. Staff at Archwell, the nonprofit foundation he co-founded with Meghan, noticed a shift. Harry, once energized and talkative, became distant, distracted, easily irritated. When asked about the palace's inquiry, he reportedly responded with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "They want proof now," he told a colleague. "Of my son? Of my family? What kind of father does that to his own child?" But privately, Harry was conflicted. The questions being asked about the birth, the missing documentation, the shifting stories, were not entirely unfamiliar. He had heard whispers before, from reporters, from aides, even from a few distant relatives during uncomfortable family gatherings. For years, he had brushed them off as jealousy, racism, or media manipulation. But now, with the monarchy itself conducting an inquiry, he was forced to face the possibility that there may have been things he wasn't told. Things only Meghan and her inner circle knew. Things he may never have fully questioned, until now. One former royal aide who once worked closely with Harry described him as a man torn in half. On one side was his loyalty to Meghan, the woman who, in his eyes, had saved him from a life of royal servitude and emotional repression. On the other, the institution that shaped his identity, gave him his titles, and, until recently, promised him legacy. And in between them stood Archie, the child who now bore the brunt of royal scrutiny. The child who, by no fault of his own, had become a constitutional question mark. As the legal process escalated and the possibility of formal removal from the royal line grew more likely, Harry's silence became more deafening. His refusal to cooperate with the king's legal team raised eyebrows. Twice he ignored formal requests for verification. On the third occasion, according to palace insiders, he sent back a brief message through his US-based attorneys. This is a private family matter. We will not participate in public proceedings. But this wasn't a family feud over Christmas plans or media interviews. This was about the legal standing of the crown. And Harry's refusal to engage only intensified concerns within Buckingham Palace. Behind the scenes, some advisors tried to reason with him. Messages were sent through mutual friends. Appeals were made by cousins. Even Princess Eugenie, with whom Harry shared a close bond, reportedly reached out. But he wouldn't budge. He felt trapped, said one friend who spoke anonymously. If he defended Meghan too hard, it looked like a cover-up. But if he asked questions himself, it meant he didn't trust her. He was caught between protecting his marriage and facing the truth. It was around this time that Harry's social circle began to shrink. Once a beloved figure in London's inner elite, he now found himself increasingly alone in California. Old friends, who once joined him for polo matches and pub crawls, began declining invites. Some feared the fallout of association. Others felt betrayed, like Harry had abandoned not just the UK, but his roots. Even within the Sussex household, tension simmered. According to one Montecito staffer, the atmosphere grew colder with each passing week. Meghan, usually media-savvy and image-conscious, became more controlling, overseeing every external communication and filtering who had access to Harry. Aides were instructed not to raise the topic of the royal investigation unless Harry initiated it. But he never did. He began spending more time alone, on long hikes through the Santa Barbara Hills, or in his home office, staring out the window. Staff would often find him lost in thought, flicking through old photos of his childhood. One image, reportedly, sat on his desk throughout the ordeal, a photo of him holding baby Archie just days after the press reveal at Windsor Castle. To Harry, that moment had been real, pure, the culmination of everything he had fought for: love, family, independence. But now, that same moment was being dissected, doubted, and potentially dismantled by the very people who had raised him. What made the silence more painful was that Harry had once been the voice of vulnerability. In countless interviews, he spoke openly about trauma, therapy, and emotional healing. He urged men to speak up, to seek help, to confront pain. But now, as his world crumbled, he said nothing. Not to the press, not to the palace, not even, some suspect, to himself. And yet, in his silence, a dangerous isolation took root. Without the support of the royal family, and with growing distance even among his American allies, Harry found himself in a unique kind of exile, not one of place, but of identity. Was he still a prince? A father? A son? Was he the rebel who broke the mold, or the man who let it all fall apart? One former royal biographer described it best. Harry has always longed to be free. But what he never understood was that freedom without clarity becomes a prison of its own. And now he's stuck, not just between two worlds, but between truth and belief. As the palace prepared for the final announcement regarding Archie's removal from the royal line, many expected Harry to make a last-minute plea. A letter, a statement, even a phone call. But none came. Instead, he remained silent. And in that silence, the monarchy moved forward, leaving Harry further adrift, a man now out of time, out of place, and increasingly out of answers.